Hello, first graders, and welcome back to another read aloud session of the Bailey School Kids Zombies That Don't Play Soccer. Last time we read chapters 3 and 4, and the biggest event, I would say, was the introduction of this old lady character. Let's see, there was a picture over here somewhere. Yes, this old lady character who was seen yelling at Coach Graves and seemed to scare the Bailey School Kids quite a bit. So I'm hoping here in chapter 4, or chapter 5 and 6, we're able to learn a little bit more about her. All right, well, let's start off here with chapter 5, which is called Zombies. Melody, Howie, and Eddie waited for Liza under the oak tree on the Bailey Elementary playground. The tips of the giant tree's leaves were just starting to turn yellow. It was early Saturday morning, and the four friends were going to soccer practice. Liza skipped across the playground to meet her friends. "Fee you!" Eddie squealed through a pinched nose. "You smell like a dead skunk." Liza put her hands on her hips and glared at Eddie. "I'm ready for a killer soccer practice. Mom let me use some muscle ointment." "I wish I'd thought of that," Melody said as they headed for the soccer field on the other side of the playground. "I bet Coach Graves is ready and waiting for it with another brutal practice. She sure has a lot of energy." Howie pointed to the bleachers on the far side of the field. "It looks like she got tired of waiting." Howie was right. Most of the other players were already clustered around the goal, but Coach Graves acted like she didn't even see them. She sat very still on the bleachers, holding the soccer ball in her lap. "It looks like she's sleeping," Melody said. Eddie shook his head. "She can't be sleeping. Her eyes are wide open." The four friends looked where Coach Graves was staring. Excuse me. "What is she staring at?" Liza asked. Howie shrugged. "She's just staring into space. A lot of people do that when they're thinking. Let's tell her we're ready to play." Howie led his friends down the sidelines of the playing field and stopped right in front of Coach Graves. He waited for her to notice him, but she didn't even blink. And then here's a picture of Coach Graves just staring off into space. I wonder why she's doing this. Howie cleared his throat. "We're ready to play soccer, Coach." Coach Graves didn't move, except to nod one time. "We need the ball," Melody blurted. Coach Graves let go of the ball. It rolled off her lap and bounced to the ground, landing near Eddie's dirty sneakers. Eddie sent the ball flying to the middle of the field with a mighty kick. All the Bailey Boomers chased after it. Melody got to the ball first. She dribbled it down the field without letting anyone else near it. A fat boy named Huey tried, but he ended up bumping into Howie instead. Eddie listened for Coach Graves to blow her whistle and yell directions, but she didn't. He glanced at the sideline. He glanced at the sideline. Coach Graves still sat at the bleachers, staring into space. Eddie grinned. It didn't bother him one bit that Coach Graves wasn't paying attention. Eddie wasn't a great soccer player, but there was something else he was good at. Trouble. The first thing he did was trip Melody. He glanced over his shoulder as he took off after the ball. Coach Graves acted like she hadn't seen a thing. Eddie tried to kick the ball, but he missed, so he scooped the ball up with his hands. "Hey," Liza yelled, "no hands allowed." Eddie tucked the ball under his arm and raced down the field to make a goal. Then he pranced around in a victory dance. "That's cheating," Howie gasped when he caught up to him. Liza nodded. "You're not playing by the rules." "Neither was Melody," Eddie argued. She wasn't letting anybody else near the ball. Melody took a step closer to Eddie. "That's because nobody else is good enough to get it from me." "We'd be better if you shared with the team," Huey called out. That started everybody arguing. Melody yelled at Huey and Howie snapped at Eddie. Liza tried to get everybody quiet, and Eddie just stood there grinning. "Quiet," Liza screamed. "We shouldn't be fighting like this." The Bailey Boomers fell silent. They'd never heard Liza yell so loudly. "I can't believe Coach Graves didn't stop us," Howie muttered. Melody nodded. "I wish she'd wake up and help us like she did last practice." "She was great," Howie agreed. "She was yelling directions and cheering us on. Now she's just sitting there." Here's a picture of Eddie carrying the ball into the net when he's supposed to be using his feet. "Maybe she lost her voice from all the yelling," Liza suggested. "Her voice was fine when she was talking to that witchy woman," Eddie reminded them. Now she's acting like a zombie from a late movie. Melody's eyes got big. You're right, she said slowly. There's something wrong with Coach Graves, and I know what it is. What? Her friends all said at once. Melody looked at each of them before speaking. Gather round and I'll tell you. Ooh, this is getting good. Chapter 6 is called Huddle. Eddie, Liza, Melody, and Howie huddled close while the rest of the team dribbled the ball back down the field. What's wrong with the coach? Eddie asked. Melody put her fingers to her lips. It's important that Coach Graves doesn't hear us, Melody warned softly. People don't like finding out that they're zombies. What are you talking about? Liza gasped. Coach Graves isn't a zombie. Melody shook her head. When I was visiting my cousin last summer, she told me some spooky things. What did she say? Howie asked. She told me about an enchantress who could turn people into walking automatons. Like robots? Eddie giggled. Sort of, Melody continued. They were people put into a trance. They had to do whatever the enchantress wanted. These zombies couldn't look people in the eye and moved very slowly. What does all this have to do with Coach Graves? Howie asked. Melody rolled her eyes. Must I tell you everything? That old lady put a spell on the coach and turned her into a zombie. Eddie grabbed Melody's arms and shook her. I think you're the zombie and your brains have taken a permanent vacation. Eddie's right, Liza giggled. After all, zombies don't play soccer. Besides, Howie added, there's no such thing as zombies. Eddie nodded. Zombies are just made-up creatures in the movies. Melody pointed to Coach Graves. Then you won't mind marching up to her and staring her right in the eyes. Is that a dare? Eddie asked. Melody nodded. It's a double dare. Eddie marched away from his friends without looking back. He knew Liza, Melody, and Howie would follow him. Eddie stopped right in front of Coach Graves and stared. The coach looked away. Eddie sidestepped so he was standing where she stared. Coach Graves looked to the left of him. Eddie hopped in front, and this time she looked at the ground. I told you, Melody hissed. Eddie looked over his shoulder. He hated it when Melody was right. He kicked his toe into the dirt and he tried to think of a plan. Eddie faced the coach again. We're finished playing, he said. It's time to go home. Do you want the ball back? Coach Graves stood up and walked slowly with her arms straight out. Slowly she walked, step by step. Eddie's eyes grew bigger as Coach Graves came closer and closer, her long fingers reaching toward him. Eddie did the only thing he could. Run. And here's a picture of Eddie trying to get Coach Graves to stare at him. So, tomorrow, we're going to read a little bit more, and I hope we find out some more information. Maybe they have a plan to figure out if Coach Graves really is a zombie. And we're going to start with Chapter 7, which is called Danger. I'm really looking forward to it. I'll see you tomorrow.